Hi everybody, I'm going to try to keep these chapters pretty brief, and I want to start by giving you the good news that the chapter on developmental concepts and self-concept, while they are super important to understand as a nurse from a psychosocial perspective, you are not going to be responsible for taking prep use on this because not very much of the material in the chapters is going to pertain to the older adult. I am going to briefly go over the stuff that does pertain, with the caveat that you are responsible to know the developmental concepts. For Block 3 pediatrics, you're going to totally want to go back and review this for pediatrics. But for now, just know the older adult. So let's get started. This particular slide talks about the role of genetics in growth and development and your physical characteristics, how they come from the chromosomes of your parents, and that genetics can influence the development of many particular diseases. We're still in the process of identifying what all of those genes are and how they work. And some generalizations you can take for growth and development. Growth is an increase in body size or changes in body cell structure, function, and complexity. Development is the orderly pattern of changes in how people develop over time and how their maturity changes in structure, thoughts, feelings, behaviors, experiences, and learning. So that's development. There's different principles of growth and development. These are outlined in your chapter. You're welcome to look at those. I don't think that we are going to be too worried about that when it comes to questions, but it's something you should understand. They typically follow a regular and predictable trend, and that's how we can use them to identify when someone is not maybe at the developmental level we expect them to be or at a growth level. Influences, factors that influence. So your genetic history is going to affect growth and development. Prenatal, individual, and caregiver factors. So I'm not going to get too much into talking about children because we're going to focus on the adult, middle adult, and older adult for the purposes of this lecture. But I want to say that most people's self-concept can be formed by the age of 6, and a lot of their values and framework. So if you have someone who's had traumatic things happen in their childhood, there may be factors that affect development that will need to be revisited with your adult patients. Environment and nutrition plays a very large role in development and growth. If you can picture someone who's malnourished in childhood, they're probably not going to grow to maybe their full height, or they may have issues with their bones later in life. Health and illness state, obviously that can be affected by growth and development, as well as culture. So the Human Genome Project didn't even exist, I don't think, when I was growing up. I'm old though. So many huge leaps have been made to determine how sequencing works in human DNA and how they've mapped out the genes and the chromosomes and been able to show linkages on how traits are inherited as well as how diseases are inherited. I guess traits would be diseases. And that's more information on genomics and epigenetics, Erickson's. So there are several stages to Erickson's theory of psychosocial development. I would say that it is probably the one we spend the most time on from a development theory perspective in nursing. You'll learn way more when you get into pediatrics. However, for our purposes, we look at the stages of development in the model, and we look specifically at when a patient has a psychosocial crisis and how they cope with that psychosocial process. So, for example, the 3 stages we concern ourselves with in Block 1 are intimacy versus isolation, which would be for ages 18 to 39, young adults. Generativity versus stagnation, which would be ages 40 to 64, which is middle adult. And then integrity versus despair for our 65 and older population. These I would be very familiar with and know the age ranges and the specifics of what we're concerned with at those different stages in Erikson's theory. So to just go over that briefly, I would like to tell you that intimacy versus isolation is, first of all, knowing that Erikson thinks that if you have something happen to you that's traumatic during the development of this stage, then it can set you back or you may not be able to move forward. So 18 to 39-year-olds, what we consider, quote unquote, a normal, healthy young adult is the development of happy relationships and a sense of commitment, safety, and caring, and the development of love. So I feel like there's more I wanted to say about that. Let me look at it for a second. Talk amongst yourselves while I do that. I feel like there is. Well, I don't remember what it was, so we'll just pretend like it's totally fine and we're good. The next stage is the middle adult years. Again, the 40 to 64-year-olds, generativity versus stagnation. This is where if they meet and do not have any issues, we will find that this age group has an established career, relationships, family, and societal engagement, development of care. So achieving social and civic responsibility, accepting and adjusting to physical changes. So that is the person who is generativity versus stagnation. Stagnation is the opposite. They have not established the career or relationships or family or societal engagement, and they don't have a sense of civic responsibility, and they are not adjusting to physical changes. So there's your stagnation. Now later in life you have integrity versus despair. This is your 65 and older generation. Think these people are probably retired or thinking of retiring. So if they have met, then the change in productivity goals and evaluations of success, they have developed wisdom. They're fine with the change in their productivity goals. They completely think that their life has been successful. Maybe they're spending time with their grandkids. Maybe they're traveling the world. Maybe they're living in their trailer in East Mesa and they're totally happy. Despair would be they are not adjusting to the lack of focus and goals. They do not feel they've been successful. They do not feel like they are wise. They're not adjusting to their decreased physical status and their health, and they're not adjusting to retirement. Maybe they're unable to do so because something happened. So picture an older adult whose spouse was the main worker and they passed away with no life insurance, and now they've had to go back to work after only having worked maybe when they were teenagers. So they're not going to make a lot of money. They didn't go to college. They're working at a minimum wage job, McDonald's drive-thru, and they're living with, a group of 4 girlfriends who are all widows. So they may be having despair because they're not going to be able to retire because they didn't have something planned that would allow them to retire later in life. So they don't have a sense of success or having accomplished goals, and they're going to just work until the day at noon on the day of their funeral, which is often what I say I will do. But I hope I don't have to. So here's some different talking points about incorporating principles of growth and development into your nursing practice, and things you need to know about growth and development. Just read over the slides. I don't need to read them to you. Basically, know the stages, but anticipate that people have their own various lifestyles and uniqueness, so you can't stereotype. How's that for saying what all that page says? And then this is how to incorporate it into plans for your patients. This is pretty true right here, and probably can't be stressed enough. Patients are members of families, and remember, families are whatever we say they are, whatever the person says they are. And that unit can have both positive and negative influences on the development of the individual members. True statement. Let's move on to self-concept. Self-concept is how your patient or how you yourself feel about yourself and when you think of yourself. So I know when I was reading some papers for you guys, you were talking about your plans for how you were going to get through school, and a lot of you said you're going to change the way you talk to yourself. So many of us have negative self-talk. So let's talk about self-concept and how we can change some of that. Self-knowledge. Do you know who you are? Do you know what you want to be? And how well do you like yourself? We can go back and look at Maslow's. We've already talked about that in a previous PowerPoint and maybe more than one previous PowerPoint. So this, where self-concept fits in the higher level of self-esteem and respect. Then you have another guy whose name is Cooper Smith from the 60s who created 4 different bases for self-esteem. It's just a different theory. We usually tend to look at Maslow's. So there's 3 different ways you can evaluate how you feel about yourself. And one is shame, which is associated with low self-worth in everything. Guilt is based on behaviors that are incongruent with the ideal self. So let's say that you, let's say you made a mistake and you never thought you would make that mistake. I don't know, maybe it was just a poor choice. Maybe you had a child out of wedlock, and that was like the first time that happened in your family, and you have guilt over that, and you gave the baby up for adoption to give the baby and yourself a chance in life so that you could both, maybe have a better life. And so you have guilt over that because your behavior was incongruent with what you had pictured as your ideal self. So you need to be able to handle that and come to terms with that. And then pride is based on having positive self-evaluation for how you wanted your life to be and how it's turning out. And then these are some different factors that affect your self-concept or others' self-concepts. Trauma, think about traumas that have experienced in your life and how that affected you. So somebody who maybe was a model and now they've had an accident and damaged their face and now they don't have their modeling career, so that changes their self-concept. Disability is a huge thing. Again, it could have been trauma-induced disability, or it could be an illness-induced disability. It could be a congenital disability. In any case, disability can affect self-concept. Illness and aging absolutely does. You look in the mirror and say, who's that person? I don't recognize them. And so some of us age more gracefully than others. Crisis or life stressors. Like loss of a loved one, especially if it's sudden, but really it doesn't have to be sudden to be a huge life stressor. Crisis could even be going through change in jobs or change in marital status. Think of the things that cause stress. History of success or failure. So how many times have you attempted something and not been successful? Sometimes that failure can be the best gift ever, and you come out stronger for that. Other times people have a hard time moving on from it and just kind of get stuck for a while. So there's many tools we can use to assess where our patients are, and really just for ourselves, where are we? What are our internal and external resources that we can use to help define our self-concept? Our culture plays a big role in it, as does developmental considerations. If you think about, I was just talking with someone about how when you're in your early 20s and you have your first serious relationship and it doesn't work out, and you just feel crushed and you think, my life is over and I'm never going to find someone that made me as happy as that particular individual did. But you realize as you age and as you have more experience and as you gain that experience comes wisdom, you realize that life goes on. It won't be the life you maybe pictured, but it will still be happy, and you'll find happiness and you'll meet new people. I remember my grandma always saying, there's other fish in the sea, and I thought, oh my God, she doesn't even care. She doesn't even understand how devastated I am. But really, I think she was speaking through her lens of wisdom and experience. I didn't feel like it at the time. But just think, wherever you are in life, you have more experience to draw and to think about how things might work out. And have compassion for your 20-year-old friends that are going through breakups, because they don't have anything to look back on and see that it worked out, and they can be completely devastated. Assessing self-concepts. What's your personal identity? What's your patient's personal identity? What are their strengths? Do they have issues with body image, self-esteem, and role performance? So maybe they had a great job, like we talked about the person who was the model, and now they can't model anymore. So their role performance has changed, their self-esteem has changed, their body image has changed, their identity's changed. That is a lot of self-concept issues to be working through with your patient. And then assessing self-esteem. What is their experience with socialization and communication? Are they super socially awkward? Do they stay at home in their room and play video games and never leave? Or do they, have a huge social circle and they communicate very well, both orally and in writing? What do they feel their significance has been in life? And what is their competence level with the things that they're doing? And do they perceive themselves to be in a position of power, or do they feel hopeless? And here's a continuum of self-concept responses. So these are responses that we show are healthy and adaptive. And then this other side is maladaptive responses. So if we have this, we need to come up with a nursing diagnosis and plan of care with our patient to help move them over here. And remember, we're holistic in care, so our psychosocial needs to be a part of our nursing diagnoses. And here's some different ways to work with your patients and yourself to uncover your personal strengths for yourself and your patients. And you can read them. I think we should do this for everybody regardless. I don't think it should be specific to maintaining a sense of self. It should be just maintaining respect and dignity for our patients. And I believe that wraps up this chapter. And remember, there is no prep you for this particular module, but it's definitely a need to know. You'll want to go back and review it before PEDS so that you have a better understanding of the entire developmental cycle for your lifetime. Thank you.